I am super excited about today's episode because we're going to talk about everything writing. And Hilary, I want you to get ready because we're going to start with you in that showering you with compliments and how we met you and how we, all of that. I will start. Hilary is someone I kind of considered, she's someone who kind of discovered me. I mean, technically, my previous agent, Laura York, discovered me kind of on paper, but Hilary purchased most of my books, and I feel like she got me. And we'll talk about this later, how important that is to a writer to have an editor who gets you. But since then, I mean, we've written a lot of books together, and of course, become friends. She's now doing her own thing. She's a ghostwriter. She's an editor. She's working with me because we created a writing retreat / intensive. So we're helping other writers. So still very busy. And yeah, I'm so grateful for our collision. And just I really feel like you were such a great first experience because I didn't have anyone, I think, before you to go into this world of, writing, publishing, all that. So thank you for that.
It's been so great.
Rebecca, your turn.
I was fortunate. The first time I met Hilary in person was at my book signing in San Francisco, which was really fun to finally get to meet Hilary in person. We met because she was my editor at Harper One, and she procured my book. And like you said, having somebody like truly see you and understand you is so invaluable. And I felt so lucky to have connected with Hilary and now to be her friend. I feel like we're friends now. And yeah, I mean, it was an incredible experience. She worked with me from the very beginning. Upon conception of my book, I sold my book based on a book proposal, so it wasn't written yet. It changed a lot from, I think, where I originally thought it was going to start and where it actually ended. And I'm really grateful for Hilary. I love her a lot. Thank you for having me.
I want to know how you guys found each other. I know you guys have obviously worked together, but is it a book proposal that landed on your desk, Hilary, or was it through?
Yeah, it was a book proposal that landed on my desk. Actually, both times. So Rebecca and John, your proposals came from agents who I had not previously worked with. They came out of the blue, so that was just like the gods above just doing their magic and like connecting us together, and me just seeing the clear like talent and voice that both of you had. And it's just been so fun watching. I mean, John, I feel like I have watched you since you were like in publishing middle school, like, and now you are this, entire brand, this entire like best-selling series. And so it's been like so fun to watch from the sidelines. And then Rebecca too, I feel like we had this conversation, and because of the nature of what you were writing about, we skipped through all of the bullshit and went right into, talking about the real stuff of life. And then having this conversation over your manuscript that was just the two of us, back and forth and back and forth, and then watching it go out into the world and the conversations around your book. I mean, we should talk about what Rebecca's book is about, because it's it's truly just so brilliant and so important. But it's been amazing.
Rebecca, if you don't know, I do everything non-linear. My podcasts are like Quentin Tarantino movies. You got to kind of piece them together.
That.
So if you don't know, Rebecca Woolf has worked as a personal essayist since her teens, contributing to numerous publications, websites, most notably her own award-winning personal blog, Girls Gone Child, which attracted millions of unique visitors worldwide. She currently authors the column Sex and the Single Mom on romper.com, and is the I don't have readers and I'm reading from my phone.
Almost 50.
She has a
my
newsletter. What is your newsletter called?
And it's at my name at Substack, Rebecca Woolf.
Yes.
At substack.com. It's called The Raid. Yeah.
And of course, her brand new book, a memoir about death and desire, called All of This, which I read, and I think everyone should read. So my partner, mother, read it, cried, loved it. I think this is an important book for men to read because it was really cool for me to read this and be taken into the inner journey of not only life and death and rebirth and motherhood, but also sexual exploration, just everything through the eyes of Rebecca. And it was an amazing story, but also it was really, really cool as a man to kind of be taken through this journey, and it made me understand more, I guess.
Thank you so much for saying that, because I don't think very many men have read this book. I think it's definitely a book that finds its way into the hands of women. I know a lot of men are afraid to read it, including men that I know. I've lost relationships because of this with men.
Oh, wait, stop. Wait, why are men afraid to read it?
And then going back even further,
why did
what
you lose
is the
relationships?
book about?
Yeah.
I should probably talk about.
Oh, see, yep, Tarantino. Okay, maybe at the very end we see
you
what
just
the
have
book
to
is about.
figure it out. You have to try to see if you can guess based on the conversation, figure out what is this book about? What are we talking about?
Let's make the audience work.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote about I wrote sort of an unlikely or an unwritten widow's story. I don't think it's unlikely. I was married for 13 and a half years.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's okay. It's real life.
I was getting ready to leave my marriage, which I'd been preparing to leave for a long time, and was finally at the end. The end had finally told him I wanted a divorce. And then weeks later, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer and died 4 months later. So I had been preparing to lose him already. I had grieved our relationship before he got sick. And then he, in the 4 months he was dying, I took care of him. I was, in my opinion, it was the only time I was actually a good wife. I didn't really feel like I was a very good wife. I don't think he was a very good husband either. And I wrote about that. I wrote about my experience navigating a marriage that was fraught from the beginning, trying to make it work, even though it clearly never did. Telling myself sort of the same stories I think a lot of women tell when they're in dysfunctional marriages. I have to make this work for my kids. I got pregnant unexpectedly at 23, married the father of my child. We didn't know each other. We were strangers. I was a child basically when I got married. I was a child when I became a mother. I sort of came of age as a wife and mother and had to learn how to sort of do it all. Motherhood came very naturally to me. Being a wife did not. And I think sort of, I basically got to a point where I was ready to leave my marriage, and then my husband died. So my experience was very complicated. I didn't want him to die. He's the father of my children. I didn't want him to leave this earth, but I wanted him to leave my life. And he did. So, in the wake of his death, I felt grief. I felt sadness. I felt anger, a lot of unresolved anger. And I also felt relieved, and I felt free, and I felt like for the first time in my life, an autonomous woman on her own. So you talked about sexual exploration. There was a lot of that happening. I had a handful of affairs while I was married. I'm not in my book, nor now do I try to pretend like I was in any way some sort of saint. I was complicated just like he was. And I wrote a story about a complicated relationship and a complicated death and a complicated aftermath, which is a story, unfortunately, we don't hear from often because we're sort of afraid to divulge those details, right? We're afraid to admit that we're human and complicated and messy, and that our love stories don't look like love stories necessarily. They look like loss stories and anger stories and all these other feelings too. So the title, All of This, sort of recognizes the nuances in my story and in just like the greater story of what it is to be a woman and a person and a mother, all of those things. So
Hilary, what gravitated you to this story / book proposal? What was it about this where you're like, oh, there's
I would
something
say
here?
just, if you were to boil it down, because every time, as an editor acquiring a book, it's thought of as this romantic thing of this like magical alchemy. But a lot of times as an editor, you're looking at something and then you're immediately figuring out, how can I distill this down to the powers that be, present it to an editorial board of the people who make decisions in publishing in a way that they will say, thumbs up, I'm going to let you acquire this book. And I just think the idea of someone who wants to leave their marriage, their husband getting diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and this sense of grieving but feeling relieved was so interesting to me. And the quality of Rebecca's writing, the way that she put it down on the page, at the end of the day, it was one of those projects where I could explain it, but it was really, I was a broken record of saying, you just have to read it. You just have to read it. And I think what I've seen as it has gone out into the world is the same thing. It's like, I love seeing all of these stories on Instagram of women who read this and they're like, this book just destroyed me. Like, you just have to read it, And I just think it brought up so many interesting conversations and the full complexity of just what it is to be a person, but definitely a woman and a mother in the world. And I just I have visceral memories of reading the manuscript in the pandemic at my dining room table. I'll just never forget it. And it's just, Rebecca is just a true writer's writer. That's how I can describe her. And I just think it's interesting, it's like you both write about, you, John, and you, Rebecca, both write about kind of flipping expectations, like upside down, right? And talking about things that other people might not talk about, and just having this very like honest, authentic representation of yourselves. And yet I think of you both as very different writers and how you identify yourselves. And I just, since we're having this conversation about writing, I wanted to like ask both of you how you have identified as a writer in your life and what's that looked like.
Yes. But real quick, let's put a bookmark there and go back to, because I want to save time for that. Why men should read this book and why you, Rebecca, got into some conflict because, or what you were saying, that because men reading this book or should read this book.
Yeah,
I want to hit that note.
I actually had a really interesting conversation with a friend of mine who's a man who's married to another friend of mine who's a woman, who said he's like, this, I read your book and it kind of changed me. Like, a man said that. And I was like, oh, wow, really? Like,
all right.
And he was like, and kind of for the same reasons you said, it was like, I'm not used to reading a book. It felt like very intimate. And I understood your, like the experience, the woman's experience more than I had before I read this book. And I started to think about, I know he read the book because he's my friend. I don't think he would have reached for this book if he didn't know me. And I don't know that a lot of men would. And I started to think about that men don't typically seek out books written by women about the female experience. And I think that's a big problem. there's a lot that men don't understand about women. And then, you know, sort of on the other side, I know women read men all the time, right? I mean, I'm looking at my kids' curriculum, and the majority of the books they're reading are by men about the male experience. I mean, I grew up reading like Lord of the Flies and Heart of Darkness and all these books that are very much about the male experience. And there were not, you know, very few men gravitate towards female written memoir. And why is that? And what are they, you know, what I think that we would be so much better off if we were sort of introduced as children to writers of opposite genders, of different experiences, obviously different racial experiences, different you know, all the, like this whole spectrum. And I think a lot of books typically are written by, you know, sort of the white male gaze. So it was interesting hearing from him. And then also, yes, I also had experiences where men read this book and were like, don't want anything to do with me afterwards.
Yeah. I think there could be judgment. I think what makes your book so powerful is how honest it is, and honesty scares people. The honesty in your book also peels labels, right? And a lot of shoulds, right? How a woman should act after, you know, the husband passes, or, you know, how a mother should be, all of this stuff. And so because you were exploring your rebirth, I think it's going to bring up a lot of resistance in men and their blueprints, and, you know, how someone in your position possibly should be or behave. And I think that's but that's also kind of the micro problem, you know, like that's, if you can't be open to reading one story, if it's activating for you, then you need to look at what's coming up and why, instead of not reading the book.
I think the whole idea of it is scary to men, you know?
Yeah, and I gotta admit, for me too, like reading it, and also, you know, I have a partner who is touched out, and she's writing her book proposal about that experience, and we have a 3-year-old. So yeah, there's a lot of moments in that book where there was resistance in me, or some kind of, you know, judgment, or, you know, something that it activated. But that's what books are supposed to do, you know, hold up mirrors, right? So anyway, going back to your question, Hilary, sorry, I threw another boomerang, but it's coming back.
Yeah,
I'm just being me, bird walking all day. Hilary, your question about our perception.
just
can you ask it again?
How you have or haven't identified as a writer throughout your life. I mean, Rebecca's been writing since she was 12, 13. I mean, forever. But professionally, quite a long time, right?
Yeah, I started writing professionally in my teens. So I was, and before that, I was always writing. Like, I was like the kid who won the poetry contest in kindergarten. Like, I didn't have a lot of friends or even know how to have a conversation, but I knew how to write it down. So writing was always my first language. I think it's more of like, I think of myself really sort of as a writer first, like before I'm really anything else, because that was in my formative years. That was how I learned to express myself and how to identify myself. So, I remember like maybe it was my mom or somebody saying like, you know, when you grow up, you're going to be a writer, or you want to be a writer. And I was like, I'm not going to, like, to me, it was never a profession. It was like, this is just what I do. Like, I'm not going to do this for work. Like, this is just, what I do. Like, I don't think there was a single day that passed. I mean, I have journals that start in preschool. Like, I was writing as soon as I learned to write my name, I was writing, you know, so I think it was more of it. Everything else came after, like, the words came before the experiences.
So you know, what's interesting is I'm hearing this, I'm very envious, because that's definitely not my story. Rebecca and I have a lot in common, like coming from the blog world. You know, we have Hilary in common, we have Harper One in common, all that stuff. But this is where we differ. This is where we're on very other sides. I wasn't a writer. I had no vocabulary. I was a C student. I would go, you know, surfing instead of doing, you know, my SATs or whatever. And so I always kind of stamped myself as not smart, right? The kid that kind of just got through. And then I went to film school and became a screenwriter. And I got represented, and I sold like one project, but it wasn't enough to make a living. And so I failed at screenwriting, stamped myself as a failed writer. And that's when I went to become a therapist at age 35. And then after therapy, or after becoming a therapist, going through a divorce, started blogging. And blogging was safe to me because it was something that I could do, have control over. It wasn't hanging on someone's yes or no, right? I didn't have to wait for the phone to ring. And so when I was blogging, I felt like I could dance like no one was watching. And that's why I was attracted to Tumblr and blogging. But I never knew that anyone would read it. And then when people started to, then that was kind of the first domino that led to my writing career. And even now, after I don't know, five books, I think I'm on book 5. I still feel like the kid that is at the party he was invited to. Like I hopped the fence. I still feel like a failed writer, and I'm working on that. I still have this core belief that I'm not smart enough, or haven't sold enough, or that I'm a fraud and someone's going to find me out. That I got lucky. So. I have less of that now, but it's still, the remnants are still there. Unlike someone like you, who was praised for your gift early on, and winning competitions and all of that.
I do also think though that like so much of it is luck. Like I think I'm not like, I mean, I feel at this point in my career, I can say like, I feel like I know what I'm doing now. Like I feel pretty confident when I sit down to write that I'm delivering something that's of value to someone at some point. But I also know that so much of any success that I've had has been luck. Like I was a right place at the right time person at so many different times. So, and like to your point about blogging, like I was like one of the early mommy bloggers. I started blogging during a time where there weren't a lot of us doing that work. It was a fairly small world, and then it exploded pretty soon after. So I was really lucky to get sort of on the ground floor of that, and make a really decent living as a writer, which is something that most writers can't say. And I get it because I'm at that point now. Like I made way more money in my early 20s and my mid 20s than I do now writing. And I was doing a lot less work then too. So, a lot of it is luck. I mean, in any industry, but
I just think
I by choice don't believe in luck.
Okay, so luck is it's like right place at the right time. It was definitely like I was, if I were like, it was the things were aligning in terms of like the space and me being in the space the time I was there, for sure. I mean, I worked really hard. I wasn't just like standing there like with my thumb out.
Yeah, you weren't just crossing fingers. I get it.
I was moving. I wasn't just waiting for a ride. But yeah,
the intersections lined up very well for you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
I just think you two are such great examples of the fact that there is not like one path to this life of being a writer, right? And that while you both came to it from very different places, the through line that both of you have is that your work is presenting some sort of honesty that the world hasn't seen yet, right? And that's why both of you are successful in what you do. And I just think that's kind of at the end of the day, it's like John and I have been running these courses to help people in their writing process. And I think that you two represent a lot of the different people that we try to help, right? It's like these people who, some of them, writing is the way that they have made sense of the world from the time of childhood. And then others, perhaps they have been, doing some sort of work that they want to further with a book now, or, there's so many ways that you come to this position, and there's not one right way, but I think so it's hard to give advice when people are coming from all of these different backgrounds and writing about such different things. But the one thing that I can say is like, flip perceptions and expectations and just show honesty and show vulnerability, which you both do, right?
Yeah.
Writing is like eating a Reese's peanut butter cup. There is no right way, right or wrong way. But speaking of writing process, obviously, Hilary's also a writer. What are your processes? So let's start with Hilary. When you get a deal and now you have to bunker down to write this book, walk us through just, broad strokes, your process. How do you do it? Mindset, structure.
I mean, I guess
all of that.
I would walk it back a little further to just go back to that whole conversation of identifying as a writer in general. I struggle with it in my own way because I'm a ghostwriter. I'm not writing even in my own voice. So I feel like that there is a whole level of imposter syndrome in identifying as a writer when it comes to that. I have now worked on hundreds of books, right? And a lot of them, when I was still an editor, I would write substantial parts of those books if I was in a very collaborative relationship with that author, but never was my name attached to it. And as a ghostwriter, my name is still not attached to it, right? And yet, so I feel a little strange laying claim to myself as a writer. And yet when I look at what I do every single day and what I pay my bills doing, it's writing, right? And so it's a very strange thing. But to answer your question of process, thank God for the freelance life. That's all I got to say. It's all over the place. There is no process for me. And also being the mother of a young child, predictability is totally out the window. So I have weeks where I don't write at all, and I just have to accept that. And then I have weeks where I feel like it's all I do. And then I get so burnt out from doing that I have to have another week where I don't write at all. But I do always know what I need to be doing.
Oh, did we lose Hilary?
Never goes away. And I am someone who makes a plan and breaks it into chunks and knows my deadlines. I write now like I used to assign my authors to write. So
nice. Practicing what you preach.
I have so much more empathy for you guys. It's so hard. And writing takes so much longer than you think, right? So just to give you an example, like right now I'm working on ghostwriting a book, and I broke it into 4 parts, and I have deadlines for those 4 parts. I'm working on part 3 right now, and I break it into word counts. I get, this is about the extent of my math that I use ever, but it's like, all right, this is going to be 20,000 words. And if it's due in X amount of weeks, then that means I need to be writing 500 words every day, which that is little, right? That's super approachable. But then my kid gets sick and I don't write all week. So then, all right, now I need to be writing 1,000 words a day. Okay, no problem. Then I have a day where I'm off my game or something. It's like, okay, now I need to write 2,000 words today. And so you just kind of shift it. But I think just knowing that I am getting to know myself as a writer, and that it really does ebb and flow, and you just have to go with your energy and trust that if you sit your ass in the chair enough, it will get done, which is a very workman approach to writing. But again, that's where I'm coming from. Like I don't always consider myself, an artist, right? Because a lot of times I'm kind of trying to assemble this like jigsaw of a mystery of this manuscript. I'm not just sitting down and coming up with something out of thin air, but
it's got to be harder to be. I would think it's got to be harder to be a ghostwriter because, I mean, you have to kind of like adapt and figure out how you're going to channel other people's voices. No?
I think it would be very hard for someone perhaps like Rebecca, who has spent an entire lifetime honing her voice. Whereas for me, it's easier because I spent my career as an editor. So I never wrote for myself. And so I'm not locked in on a certain style of writing. I am much more comfortable hearing somebody and distilling what they say. And yes, I still need to make it sound like them, but I typically work with authors who aren't the opposite of we're like-minded in some way, so I can get on their level.
Right.
And hopefully, they have a sense of humor, because I end up twisting that into whatever I work on. But yeah, yes, it is hard, but it's hard to judge what's on the hierarchy of difficulty. I have no clue.
Yeah. Rebecca, what is your process? If you could tell us, in broad strokes.
God, I'm such a mess too. Like I think probably similar to you, John, like I have no formal education, like at all. I never learned how to do anything. I really, I've never taken a writing class in my life. Like, I don't know how I'm supposed to do things. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I actually just was teaching a class, and like one of our last class was about our process. And I was like, fuck, like, what is my process? Like, what do I do? I mean, when I was working on this book, I'm really good with a deadline. I need them. I'm really good when someone gives me one, and I'm really good when I give them to myself. I just have to be like really forceful. So right now I'm writing a newsletter again, and I'm writing an essay a week. Like, that's what I have to do. Because I'm writing about my personal life, I'm literally doing this thing that I did when I was blogging, where I'll be having a moment. This is like kind of embarrassing to say this out loud, but I'll be having a moment, and I have this very like, suddenly I'm like directing, like I'm like, there's like a cinematic element where like there's a song in the background, and there's like a voiceover in my head. And like, this happened last night when my son is going to prom tonight, ordered a corsage for his date. A boutonniere arrived in its place yesterday. And I called the florist, and I was like, you guys, I ordered a corsage. And they were so rude. They're like, no, this is what you ordered. I was like, I'm looking at the order. It says corsage, and I'm looking at the picture. You sent me a boutonniere. It has like the pins. And they're like, sorry, we'll give you like a 30% off. Like, they gave me like $10 back on like a $60 order. I was like, what? And so I was like, fuck, I have to go, as usual, MacGyver this into something else. So my son and I went to Joann last night, like 10 minutes before they closed. Like, we've got 10 minutes to like figure out how to turn this corsage into a boutonniere. And I've had the most insane week. My dog died this week. My son got accepted to like, his first group of schools, one of them with a full scholarship. It was like the most emotionally roller coastery week. My kids were off because of the teacher strike. I'm like so not in my body, and I'm standing here looking, and my kids are all there, and they're running around Joann down at the bottom of the stairs. I'm standing here on top of the stairs, just like looking down, and I'm like writing an essay in my head about taking the corsage and turning it into boutonniere, and how this represents all these other things. And I'm creating this whole thing in my head with the song going. And that's really, I know that's probably not helpful for anybody, but my process, I guess, is just to sort of think about a moment that punctuates my life, and to say, okay, this means something more than just this thing. Like, I'm at Joann 10 minutes before it closed, trying to turn a boutonniere into a corsage. This is exactly my life. This is it. This is my moment. And this is what it's going to look like. And I start to sort of thread the needle through all the things that happened during the week. My dog, and the colleges, and the high, and the crying, and this and the that, and the strikes and the rain. And I put it all sort of in this one moment in Joann at the top of the stairs. And then I come home and I write about it.
That process is a lot of what therapists do with their clients, pulling themes, connecting dots. And when I meet a writer, not someone who says they're a writer, but actually someone who actually writes every day, I already feel this connection, this kinship to him because it's the same thing happens with comedians. Comedians who meet other comedians, they already know. And I know how you see the world. I know that you take a highlight marker to parts of your life as you go through
That's
it.
a beautiful way of saying that.
And you're already writing in your head. Yeah. And so I connect with writers in that way. And I also know the struggle because sometimes we sit at the computer and we just stare at a blank screen with self-doubt and all of that. I know how hard it is. Like every time we create something, there is a hero's journey. There is, we're slaying dragons. We're coming back to the village change. So whenever I meet a writer, I always geek out because I'm like, oh, I've been there. I've done the reps. I've done, and so we have that comment. It's like people who have, gone through like the Marines, and they not together, but separately. And they're like, yes, I was there too.
It's interesting because
like
I've never had the experience of sitting at my desk and not knowing what to write about. To me, it's the opposite. To me, it's like, I go out in the world, and this was the advice I was trying to give my students the other day. I was like, don't sit at your desk for an hour and wait for the shit to come. Go to fucking the store, deal with your shit. That is where your story is. And I know it's different with fiction, obviously, but I don't actually think it's that different. I think that we like kind of, we're waiting for something to happen to us instead of happening to it. Right. And so for me, like, the act of writing is not passive. It's really active. It's really about it's like alchemizing my day, my week, my life, my feelings, my experiences, and putting them on paper and not sitting down on paper to alchemize the experience. You know what I'm saying? I've come at it from the other side and I've never had writer's block. I've never sat at my desk and been like, I have nothing to write today. I'm at a point where I'm like, I just have no time to write is my problem. Like I have too many kids, too few of myself, too many like responsibilities, things that I have to do in order to like pay the bills, make money. So my work, like my true work, the me stuff always comes last. So it's like, and I used to in my youth, I would be able to sit down and write an essay every single day, which is what I did in my blogging days because I was 25 years old and had all this energy. Now I'm 41 and I don't, and my kids need to go, they always have last minute. There's always some sort of thing I need to be like running out in the middle of the night to deal with, or someone's, so I have so little time, and maybe that's it. Maybe it's because I don't have the option of sitting down for 2 hours and waiting for it to come. I have to like write on my notes app in the 20 minutes while my frozen pizza's heating up in the oven, which is where I do the majority of my work on my kitchen floor on my notes app. Like I'm not sitting down to write at a computer. I'm pulling over on the side of the road. I'm in my kitchen. I'm at my kids' volleyball practice. Like I am in the grocery store. I'm in Joanne checking out going, oh my God, this is a thing. I'm seeing this. This is how I'm feeling. I'm constantly taking notes on what's happening in my day and my life and then trying to sort of turn that into something when I have the time to do it.
I think that's so refreshing to
Yes,
hear.
and by the way, Rebecca has four kids.
I have 4 kids. My oldest is about to be 18,
yes.
and then I have a 14-year-old daughter and twin 11-year-old daughters. Boy, girl, girl, girl. And it's just me.
There's always a boutonniere that needs to be changed into a corsage with that lifestyle. It never stops. Right. But I think that's so refreshing to hear because I think, for people who are looking to be writers that write, they have this idea that you need to be sitting at your beautiful desk and, putting on your writer's coat. But the fact that, oftentimes writers who write are actually doing it in the parking lot is really liberating. Right. And so I think, for the people who John and I have been working with and trying to help, that's something that's so important for them to hear.
Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of peace and quiet is such bullshit. Like I've never had peace and quiet. I've been writing.
You wouldn't be able to write. Nothing would come to you, actually.
Honestly, that's exactly right. I would have nothing to write about. Peace and quiet. Like I'm not I can't sit in a room like I can't. And even if I am, I have music going. Like I'm usually at it's really hard for me to write but I always sort of reframe it as like, how do you write in the war and noise? How do you create a practice in doing the work that you need to do in that? Not only how do you work in the war and noise, how do you use the war and noise to enrich your work? Because when we sit in the silence, I think for a lot of us, it's overwhelming for one. It's so intimidating. It's a lot less intimidating to try to write in a grocery store than it is to write in your silent office with candles burning in this whole sacred space. Like, for me, it is, because then I feel all this pressure. Like, fuck, I got an hour. I better perform, right? You get like performance anxiety where like you're in the grocery store in the pasta aisle, just kind of jotting down whatever it is your idea. Like, it's different. So I think like, I try to tell this to people who are like, I don't have time, or I get overwhelmed, or I just sit in my office for 2 hours and like nothing comes out. Get the fuck out. Like, go out, go. You know, go work, go to the airport, go somewhere where it's like, go to the cemetery. That was another thing. Like, I wrote a lot at the cemetery when I was working on this book. And I love the idea of doing work in a cemetery because you're surrounded by people, energy. They're dead, they're quiet. They're very considerate of the fact that so you're working sort of with this energy, but it's also quiet. But I always tell people, like, if you're having writer's block, if you're sitting there and you can't get the words out, go somewhere where you're going to hear words, where you're going to be around people, where you're going to be someone's going to say something and it's going to inspire you to do this, or you're going to smell something and it's going to remind you of this. Like, go to where you're going to be stimulated if you're feeling unstimulated.
So I also love what you're saying because it shatters the misconception that authors sit in front of their computers with candlelight and the perfect music and just for hours they're typing. I, like you, am remote. I mean, I also podcast on the go. I'm usually behind a dumpster, either doing a video, podcast, or writing. And my notes is crazy. It scrolls forever because that's what I do. Just note, and then they're basically thousands of little jigsaw puzzles, which come in the form of revelations and thoughts, that when you are able to sit in front of a computer, you now start to, put those puzzle pieces together to create that image. I do think there's one person on this planet that does more writing than actual living, and that's Stephen King. I don't know him personally. I think he goes into the woods and he just sits in front of his computer and knocks out like a book every weekend. And doesn't really have much of a life.
I think that's probably the more common way of doing it. I just also think there are so many, like everything, there's so many different ways. And I think people we have so little imagination, just period, in general, right? In our relationships and how we go about them and how we exist in the world and how we write. And I think that there's this sort of Virginia Woolf-esque room of one's own. One must need a room of one's own in order to write. And I think especially for women, especially for caretakers with small children, it's impossible. It's impossible. So I actually feel really lucky that I never had that. I never had a room of one's own. I always had, I was always writing with kids attached to me. Like, I had to figure out how to work in spite of the fact that I had all of these children hanging on me. So, it's taken a lot of time to sort of figure out what works and not to put too much pressure on myself. And I just, I sort of want to preach that gospel too, because I think that for a lot of us, we don't have the option.
I always tell people, and I approach everything this way, social media, podcasting, and writing, live your life, and the ripple from that is the writing, the content or whatever you're creating, so that's the way it works for me. You're threading writing into your life. You're not, writing isn't the separate thing that is plugged in.
Yeah.
Hilary, question for you. What would be your dream? So you've done so many things. I mean, you've worked in publishing. One of the things that you bring to the table in our workshops is pulling the curtain back, because no one knows what happens behind the scenes, because no one talks about it, right? It's very secret. It's also like the agent world, and you have done that for many years, ghostwriting, editing, working with hundreds of writers, many who have gone, to sell bestsellers and stuff. What are you running toward now, as far as if money was no object, what would be your ideal writing or career in this world?
I think, I'm laughing as you guys are talking about writing on the go, and, you just have to like get in where you fit in, because actually the three of us are talking today because we are going to do the opposite of that and come together for a writing retreat.
Yes.
Where we actually are all singularly focused on writing and carving out time and cutting out all of the distractions, right?
Always,
But
yeah.
I mean, I think that there, and I know that both of you have done that. I mean, Rebecca's book cover is taken, right, when you actually were able to go to Joshua Tree and work in this kind of nice solitude. And John, I know that you do these little, you know, quick getaways to bang out like a bunch of material. And that's all to say that, like, I'm really excited about, if money were no object, yes, I would like have some sort of writing compound in some beautiful place, and I would work with, you know, people who excite me and who inspire me, and I would continue to help them. I would also like to write a book with Danny DeVito. That's a side note.
Yeah, I love that. Manifest that.
Wow, interesting.
Yeah. So I'm putting it out there.
Why Danny DeVito?
Well, because
what's
like,
that about?
Besides Robin Williams, who I can't do a book with because he has passed, Danny DeVito is just legendarily one of the kindest people in the entertainment business. There's all of these Danny DeVito stories.
Oh, interesting.
But I also think that he is this perfect combination in the celebrity world of extremely nice person, but also crazy interesting. When you look at like his career and the projects he's worked on, I mean, it's like, you know, from Taxi to Matilda to Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Right. He just like has a real crazy portfolio. So not to turn this into a Danny DeVito.
I love that.
But
no, you should.
I'm putting it out there, right? So
I love it.
But okay. I do want to bring that around to just like, what is the value in giving yourself that kind of retreat, however you can, like, how has that helped you two in your lives, and in this whole thing of like, the process is usually chaotic, but every once in a while you can give that to yourself.
I think it works on so many levels. So one, just getting out of your usual environment. We're doing this in the woods, Idlewild. It's only 2 hours away, so it's local, but there is snow there, you know, and making fire, having coffee. And then it's also like this micro incubator, right? So being surrounded by like-minded people who we respect and we could bounce ideas off of, that's gold. And then the Breakfast Club element, right? Strangers who maybe we wouldn't normally have met in this one space, from a common thread of writing, all different walks of life, different stories. So getting to know people and their character arcs, you know, as humans, and then just talking shop and geeking out about that. I mean, it's so. And then on top of that, we have a chef too, so the food has to be amazing. No pizza takeout, nothing like that. I mean, in that way. It is going to be special. There won't be any massages or anything, but the food has to be epic, and that's gonna be beat you. So all of those pistons pumping, it just, I think you're gonna leave very fulfilled and filled up, and you know, there are no promises on if you're gonna be able to sell your book, but we are also gonna give you a lot of information and access to an agent, which is a whole nother thing that I never.
Yeah, I agree. And also I think there's a big difference between going on a retreat with people and being alone somewhere. I think a lot of people do need to be alone to write. I'm just not one of those people. And to your point about Joshua Tree, I went to Joshua Tree to work and I didn't do any work there. Like, I couldn't. I went to Joshua Tree and thought my book ends in Joshua Tree and I'm alone. And it's the first time I've been alone in 20 years. And I needed that. I needed to be alone. But also I couldn't work in those conditions. I couldn't write, and it was too quiet. I was too alone. So, and I love going on retreats, and I love being there. I love speaking at them. I love working at them because, like you said, you're surrounded by your people. You're surrounded by your people that you don't even know are your people yet. And I think being in that sort of energetic space is so valuable. I feel so like fed by knowing that other people are working. It's why I love working in coffee shops. Obviously COVID killed that for me, and I'm sort of like trying to figure out like return to that. But I think working and being in a space surrounded by other people who are working, to me, that's so motivating. And I really value that. Like, I think there's so much value in that for anyone, for everyone.
When I was reading your book, because I grew up in LA, all the places you were talking about, I love that you mentioned them. I was just like, oh yeah, I've been there. And I also love that you worked at a coffee shops. I always thought like, oh, I work at a coffee shops because I'm broke and I can't afford an office. And now I'm like, no, that's where the nectar is. That's where life is. And if I was writing in an office, I would have hated it. So
Rebecca, wait,
anyway,
can you tell us really
sorry,
quickly, because you have been going to more of these writing retreats and getting a taste of, what people can come away with. Can you tell us a little bit about like how you have been helping other writers at events like this and what, you're kind of teaching?
Yeah, I mean, really, my whole thing is writing. Is what are you afraid to write about? Let's write about that. I think for me, I think there's a reason why we're afraid to write, and I think to your point about feeling blocked, I think a lot of the blocking comes from fear. I can't write about that, or how do I write around that, or how do I write that without saying that? And I think really what I love to teach, what I love to talk to people about is like, what is it that you're hiding, and why are you hiding that? Why are you afraid of that? And who are you afraid to share that with? And let's like really get to the let's get to the root of why you're afraid, so that you can come out. And whether or not you end up sharing that big secret or that big moment with the world, just to give yourself the opportunity to start writing about it and digging into it a little bit more, and then sort of like gardening in the vicinity of that. To me, that's what's interesting, and that's sort of my goal as a teacher at a conference or a retreat, is just to get people like really sort of digging in the parts of their garden that they don't want to explore, right? Like, because we can tell the truth without telling the whole truth. And so, like, for example, like I use the analogy of like when you take a photograph of your kid or whatever, and it's like there's shit in the corner of the room, and you can easily crop it out so you don't see the dirty laundry in the corner. But it's it's still honest. This is still what I see in this frame. I am so much more interested in what's out of frame. To me, that's the good stuff in anyone's art and their writing and their anything. So for me, it's like, let's instead of let's take everything that we cropped out. Let's go and find all the things that you cut out. That's what I want you to write about. That's what we should be exploring. That's what I want to dig into. That's what's interesting to me.
So it's not the photo of me with no pants pointing my taint at the sun. That's not interesting. It's a little life jacket you see in the corner hanging on the fence.
Yeah.
And no, but I love what you said, out of
even
frame.
Just this, like, this is a good example. Like, I mean, I've got a messy bookshelf behind me. Like, this is also, I'm into the mess. I think the mess is hot. I'm always like, let's look at the mess. But I think the majority of us are cropping out the mess, right? We're trying to get our frame right, so we don't see that there's like shit going on over here. And again, like, I go back to that all the time. Like, what's out of frame? And I do that with myself. I interrogate my own shit all the time. I'm like, what am I writing about here? What could I be writing about? What's out of frame? How do I really dig into that? That's what's interesting to me right now at this point in my life. And it's the same with the people that I know, the conversations I have with people. Like, I don't want to know how your day was or what your bullshit is. Like, I want to know all of that. I want the out of frame stuff, you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, if that speaks to you, Rebecca Woolf is actually doing a workshop at our retreat. This is happening end of May. All of us are going to be there. And plus, we're going to have one person who's not here. She's a lit agent, and she will be Zooming in. So we're bringing a lot of different colors to the woods. Hilary and Rebecca, thank you for being on my podcast. And I hope, and also thank you for all the work you guys are doing. I know that as writers, we're not aware of, the ripple that our stones make, that we throw. And so we get reminded by emails or people telling us, but we're, in our world writing. And so, man, I mean, Hilary, all the books that you have touched and all the people, and I mean, shit, Rebecca, I mean, since the blog days, so I can't even imagine. I mean, we're not even just talking about your books, but your blogs, what kind of net that has thrown. It's, I mean, we've collectively have reached, I would say millions. And so
Mhm.
just want to remind you, because sometimes
Thank
I
you.
need that reminder myself as well. So thank you for all the work you are doing in the world. And you could find out about the retreat. Just go to my Instagram, hit my bio link, or it'll be in the show notes. And we hope to see you in person in Idlewild end of May. Yes. Yes.
Oh, my
What
handle
is
is Rebecca
your
Wolf
handle?
with 3 O's because I don't. It's a long story, but just there's 3 O's in there.
And Hilary, what is yours? At if you love peacocks roaming the streets, Hilary stories always. They must be live. Oh, are they turkeys? Okay, there's animals always on your Instagram stories that live by your house. And I'm like, what are these animals? Turkeys. Yeah.
hmm Yeah, totally.
I love it. I love it. Thank you for listening, everyone. Be well.